We're going to go ahead and get started. Next slide, please. All right, Cindy, what is the difference between traditional publisher-created content and open educational resources?
All of us are very familiar with traditional publishing. It has high student costs. It's published by big box publishers such as McGraw-Hill, Pearson, or Cengage. Copyright retention is with the publisher. So as an author, once you make your agreement, give them your content, it is out of your hands, never to be there again. And often revisions and corrections to the work, next slide, to the work is they're very slow, I should say. Open educational resources, otherwise known as OERs, are described by UNESCO as learning, teaching, and research materials in any format and medium that reside in the public domain or are under copyright with an open license. These licenses permit no-cost access, reuse, repurposing, adaptation, and redistribution by others. So in a sense, these are free resources and often have zero or do have zero textbook costs. They're produced by a variety of publishing tools. In our case at University of West Florida, we use Pressbooks. There are others that you may have heard of, such as LibreText, Manifold, Katia, and Rebus. Open educational resources, for the most part, have Creative Commons licenses. And what these allow for is the author retains their copyright, and the licenses, of which there are 6 types, basically allow them to tell the world or globally how that work can be used. These licenses range from no restrictions to open but restrictive. The other important point is, since they're basically digital works, you can do real-time revisions and updates. Next slide, please. So Andi is next. What are the different forms of OER? Adoption, adaption, and creation.
All right, next slide, please. All right, so there are 3 different types of OERs, and what you choose depends on your course needs. For adoption, this is when you go online and find an OER for your course and no changes are needed to it. You can basically place it in your course and you're done. For adaption, you may find an OER that needs some changes to meet your course needs, such as deleting chapters or maybe just adding a few more chapters imported from other OERs that have same Creative Commons licensure requirements to get all your topics covered. And this is basically to customize the main resource that you found that's already, with already created materials from other OER sources. Now for creation, that's when you can't find anything existing to meet your course needs. So you either have to start from scratch, writing your own OER resource, or you can, as I like to call it, and Katherine and I have worked on this before, Frankenstein. You put many, many resources together to create the OER of your dreams. Next slide. All right, so why adopt? That is the easiest way to get an OER. It's the least time intensive. It can be utilized almost immediately. It's pretty much a no-brainer when you find the perfect resource. And this is the best OER when you need to change your current resource in a very short time frame. This is for situations like your book may no longer be published, or they may have stopped using the online content, or if you're just sort of done with using the same book or publisher. This can be accomplished in several weeks, or to be safe, I would suggest about a semester. Next slide. All right, so why adapt? Adaption is slightly more time intensive depending on how much needs to be revised in the OER you choose. This can be done in a semester or even up to a full academic year, for those wanting to add a little bit more OER resources to that selection. And this is also called the revise and remix method. Basically, to simplify, you find the resource that you need that needs some tweaks. And I'm going to use an example I created, and I did an adaptation for a medical terminology book. It had everything that I wanted, and the chapters already matched my existing course. I just needed to delete some that I didn't use and to rearrange to get the content in the order that I normally teach the course. We also, because this was the book that the OER resource that we based it on was Canadian, we had to change some Canadian spelling of words, sort of the French versions, and also any references to Canadian medical organizations to those in the United States. We did this in a very short time frame because my publisher would not make updates to mistakes in online content exercises that I had my students do. But I really don't recommend doing that as fast as we did. And I'm not going to tell you how fast we did that. Take at least a semester. All right, next slide, please. All right, so why create? This is where you can't find an existing resource that meets your needs. You may find chapters or content in multiple resources. And when I mean multiple, I mean possibly over 25 or more different resources. This is best done when you have plenty of time to make this book switch. This is the most time intensive of the OER types. This can take up to an entire academic year to create or even more. Now, Katherine and we usually work together as a team, and we did so for our Cornerstone course, and we did a creation. And we've been talking about leaving our publisher for our Cornerstone course book because they kept increasing the cost to the student. And so when we started going into this decision, we knew that this course covered many varied topics, so we probably weren't going to find exactly what we needed in one resource. And that's when we realized we were really going to have to Frankenstein a bunch of resources together, and this was going to take a long time because we had over 25 plus resources to reconfigure, edit, and also create that interactive content. And this process took us about a year with the two of us. Next slide. Now, Kathy, what are the benefits to using OER in your courses, and why did you choose to develop or adapt an OER?
Well, I'm glad you asked. Next slide, please. So as Cindy had mentioned, a primary factor for me was cost. But for example, I have been teaching a leadership course for over 10 years when I decided to adapt an OER. And when I started teaching that course, it was on its 2nd edition, and now it's on its 8th edition. And not a lot of new information had come about, but it was very costly for students. So that was a primary factor. A second factor was access. Students didn't always have the resources or ability to purchase the textbooks on time when the class starts. I teach 8-week classes, so if you're missing even 1 week, that's a problem. Otherwise, there were barriers related to bookstore, getting the textbooks and things of that nature. And so that was another reason for me. And then finally, quality. I had noticed some trends in some information in the textbooks that I have been using over the years, and I questioned the quality of the information being shared. And so I decided it was best that I pursue development on my own. The picture there represents another reason why I decided, and that is because I teach nurses who have already a degree, an associate degree in nursing. They're licensed and they're pursuing a bachelor's in nursing. But all the textbooks that I find in nursing speak to the baby nurses, as we call them. And this happens to be my granddaughter, who was in a simulation activity with us a number of years ago. But I don't like that they were not speaking to the audience that I would like them to speak to. Next slide, please. So in terms of cost, having adapted the course, the book that I developed, I have been able to demonstrate savings of about $92 per student in one course. And this course is offered 3 times a year. So that's up to $12,000 per course. And so that's definitely a good ROI. Secondly, it's accessible the first day of class. I haven't had any students not being able to access the materials. Sometimes there were codes required and things of that nature, financial aid delays, none of that has been a problem. And then thirdly, contemporary information. This is where the quality comes in. For example, I teach a population health course, and during COVID, we wanted to talk about COVID, but that information was not published yet. It came out years after COVID, and by adapting or adopting an OER, I can then input relevant contemporary information in real time. So I was able to then create a OER that speaks to my student audience, and it's just an example of the book that I developed, and it's leading change in health system strategies for RN to BSN students. And again, it's tailored to this particular population, and those are some of the reasons why I chose to pursue this OER. Next slide, please. So next, Karen is going to tell us what were the specific steps or roadmap that you followed to create an OER resource for your course. And can you describe both the process and the time frame?
Absolutely. Thank you, Kathy. So in this section, we'll be focused on process. And the first step is to explore the OER resources that are currently available and how they might fit. In my case, the librarian, Cindy, who you met, helped me identify multiple resources, but it was clear that there was no one resource that would align and that I could adopt. So for this reason, I chose to adapt from several that we did find and create a new OER resource. And this step of figuring out which direction to take took about a month. Next slide, please. So once the decision to adapt was made, organization became key. I started by building a resource worksheet, what you're looking at right now, which was used to track all of the resources I was considering using by topic. It included a link to the resource, copyright information, need for permission to use, and who the author was. Because, as Cindy mentioned, resources have copyright restrictions that limit what can be combined, I also use this document to make final decisions on which resources to actually use in the book. Next slide. Once resources were chosen for each topic, I then needed to organize how these topics would flow in the new book. On the advice of a colleague, I used Google Jamboard to create an outline, or a whiteboard, if you will. The blue Jamboard on the left organized the book chapters and the sections within each chapter. The white Jamboard on the right organized each topic for each section of an individual chapter. Development of the resource worksheet and the Jamboard took me about a month and a half to complete. Next slide, please. So as each section of each chapter was developed in Pressbooks, I also, once the flow of the book was organized, I began to develop the book in a software we mentioned before known as Pressbooks. The librarian was really helpful here, especially technically, since I was very new to using Pressbooks. Next slide, please. And as each section of each chapter was developed in Pressbooks, I also copied it over to a Word doc. And the purpose of this was to keep track of where the content originated. I also called this my attribution log and used it to check for missing or incorrect citation by uploading this to a website I used called ReciteWorks. Creation of the entire book in Pressbooks took me about 6 months to complete, and that was also teaching 4 classes. So 6 months also with my teaching load. Next slide, please. So a few other thoughts. As content was added to Pressbooks, an instructional design expert, which in my case was a graduate student, helped me to standardize heading formats, create alt text, made sure linked PDFs were accessible, and helped me to add interactive activities into each chapter. If you're going to include a glossary as back matter, I would recommend considering creating it as you go, as you move through each chapter in Pressbooks. But front matter, which is the introduction and acknowledgements, could be created at the end when the book is complete. Finally, I found peers to carefully read and critique the book. In my case, I asked a few colleagues who also taught the course and understood both the goal of the text and the content. And they were identified many errors in format or inconsistencies in the flow of the content that helped to improve the final product. And lastly, the librarian assisted me with publishing the book, making it available to the public, and I was able to keep making minor edits even after it was published. Next slide, please. So now I'll turn it over to Katherine. Katherine, how do OERs make it easy to create interactive content? What were some of the major challenges you faced during the process of creating OER resources, and how did you overcome them?
Thank you. Yes, so as the previous speakers have mentioned, at UWF, we use the Pressbooks platform, which integrates with H5P and TablePress plugins, and those are tools that make it very simple to create interactive content. I've prepared a video demonstrating some of these activities. It doesn't have sound, but I'm going to talk over it and talk you through what we created. Next slide, please. And play. There we go. So at its very basic form, H5P makes it very easy to organize content. So here we have what's called an accordion table, and this allowed us to let students expand and collapse content. We also created dynamic tables. So instead of having a table with multiple columns that would take up the whole page, we were able to create concise tables that had embedded pictures. And this way students can flip through the columns and see all the information we wanted to share with them. We're also able to embed photos and videos, including videos straight from YouTube. So our students in our medical terminology course have really loved these videos in particular. They can just play them straight through the textbook as they're going through the content. We've also been able to include flashcards. So these are pre-made. Students don't have to do anything. They just go to the flashcard activity, start flipping through them, and start studying. We can also attach audio files so that the students can hear these words pronounced. We also have a range of drag and drop activities that are either text-based or image-based. And some of the feedback I've heard from our midterm students is that they love seeing the material in this way and being able to practice it in this interactive way. We can also use H5P to create reflection activities. So in this one, students are asked a range of questions about their career goals. And when they're done answering these questions, they can export their answers to a PDF. This is an ungraded optional activity that we put in the book, but there is the potential that it could be used for a graded assignment, homework. There are a lot of possibilities with H5P. And finally, we've added knowledge checks to the end of our chapters. So these, in our Career Essentials course, our students are asked to complete these quizzes and take a screenshot showing that they completed that activity, and they submit it to our learning management system to receive credit. Pressbooks offers more high-tech solutions for integrating content with learning management systems, but credit goes to Andi for coming up with an alternative method that was a lot more straightforward to implement. Next slide, please. So one of the biggest challenges with these activities in particular was accessibility. Not all H5P content types meet accessibility criteria. And even activities that do meet accessibility criteria don't appear in PDF exports, which we've allowed students to access and download. So what happens is, as you can see in our top screenshot, ebook readers can access the test yourself activities. But if you're reading this on PDF, what you have is a URL. So that means you have to be connected to the internet, you have to click on that link, you have to access the link, and then when you're ready to return to your book, you have to find your book again on your device. Also, the dynamic table that I showed in the video, that is not accessible to screen readers. So students would miss out on that content if they relied on a screen reader. Next slide, please. So what we did was we created a lo-fi solution. We created two appendices. One is for our table. So this is a plain table that has all of the same content, excluding the images, as our lovely table that I showed before, except this one follows best practices for accessibility and can be read by people using screen readers. We've put in a link in that chapter underneath the dynamic table. So if a reader needs to access the table in a different way, they can click and get straight to this plain table. We've also created an appendix containing offline versions of our quizzes. So this means if a student has to access the book through a PDF or if they print it up, they're still able to go to the back of the book, take the quiz, see if they know what they think they know, and they're able to benefit from these activities just the same as a person accessing it through our ebook. Next slide, please. So I know that we received a lot of support through Cindy. She's wonderful. But Cindy, can you explain how has the state, university, and specifically the library supported OER initiatives?
Okay, and hopefully they're doing some drilling on concrete. Hopefully you will not get to hear that as I talk. So the state, university, and library support OER initiatives that are, the state has growing support through the Florida Virtual Campus. Florida Virtual Campus provides a suite of centralized shared services that support all 40 public colleges and universities in Florida. Some of the things that they are doing are they have training initiatives. They're working on training for OER authors. They have a icon, a zero textbook icon that can be used in registration systems so that students can recognize courses that have zero textbook cost. And then the Textbook Affordability and OER Committee are working on OER recommendation lists for general education. The university, on the other hand, has created what's called the ACE Awards, Adapt, Create, and Engage. And these are awards for faculty and mentors. So mentors would be those people who have experience in publishing or with Pressbooks that assist faculty as they develop their works. We provide OER, Pressbook, and copyright Creative Commons training. This training is completed before you start your project. There is an online Canvas OER training and certificate that's available to faculty. And we are the hosts for the Pressbooks authoring platform. So any issues and working with it basically comes through us. And then lastly, of course, we have 2 librarians that support this work from start to finish and then after. And that's been very satisfying to see works go from 0 to 10. Some of our outcomes, we have 8 books currently published and 8 in progress. To date, we've had a savings collectively of over $200,000 for students. And we've had our books accessed by over 120 countries. It's just been a lot of fun to watch our numbers grow. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
All right, could you please, Amy, pull up the poll number 2? Poll number 2 is, after hearing this presentation, are you most likely to adopt an OER, adapt an OER, create an OER, or stay with your traditional textbook? I'll give you a couple more minutes to answer that. All right, I see I'm not able to launch the poll. If you click down at the bottom, let's see, or Amy, can you? I'm going to go ahead and share the results. Can you see the results now? Okay. All right. And Amy, could you go back? I think one more slide. There we go. Okay. All right. So we wanted to thank you for letting us present today. My name again is Andi Nelson, and we have Kathy Andresen, Katherine Greene, Cindy Gruwell, and Karen Valaitis. All of our contact information is up there. We also have a QR code that links to all the resources that we created here at UWF on Pressbooks. And then if you're wondering why we have an armadillo on our page, that is our Argadillo, our unofficial mascot for UWF. Our mascot really is the Argo from Jason and the Argonauts, but we have a ton of armadillos on campus, and somebody in our tech department decided to create the Argadillo as when you get a 404 error. So it's sort of become our unofficial mascot who we love. So now we're going to open it up to any questions you may have. If you want to put them in the chat, or if you have questions, I know Amy and Holly, did any come in from y'all?
Yeah, we don't have any in the chat right now, but I would encourage people right now to either pop on or go in the chat and ask your questions while we have these ladies' expert attention. I have a question actually. What is there a cost for Pressbooks, or is that a free resource?
There's definitely a cost.
Okay.
There's a cost, and there are different levels, and depending on what level you're at, you have different abilities. Let me put it that way. There is some interaction with Pressbooks. You can export the book and pull it into your LMS, depending on what system you're using. They also are in the process of testing the interactive part, so that you can do interaction in the book and the grades for a grade, and the grade be pulled into the grade book. And that's something that they're working on right now.
Oh, that's really cool.
But like to use, Holly, also to use the Pressbooks, that like if you use a QR code, that's something where you can just take the link to the book and then put it in your class directly. That doesn't cost anything. And that's what's nice about this. And if you go to sites like Pressbooks, Merlot, or Open Libre, or anything like that, that's content that can come in to your course for free. All right. And thanks for putting about Pressbooks pricing in the chat too. Any other questions? I think between all of us, we've done a little bit of each of those types of OERs, and we'd be happy to fill you in a little bit more on the process. We wanted to give you a general overview of sort of, you know, what we do and why we do it. Any other questions?
I think any details would be much appreciated because you ladies are sort of on the forefront of sort of, for most of us, it's a burgeoning idea. It's on our list of things to do, but it's on a back burner. So any help and pitfalls, things like that, we're happy to hear about.
Well, Catherine and I were sort of the guinea pigs for the university with this. And I would say if you can partner with someone, that is one of the best ways to do this, just to have somebody to hold you accountable. And also the mentoring support that the library gave us. It was nice because Catherine and I had a meeting every other week, and then we met with our librarian mentor every other week. So you sort of were held to that responsibility where, you know, you're always held accountable. And so that to me, along with being organized, like what Karen showed you with the use of Jamboard, really trying to get that organization from the beginning, because if you don't have that, then, you know, it can be a little bit longer of a process because you may get to, you know, further along in your book and then realize, oh, I didn't cover what I was supposed to cover in a certain chapter. Anybody want to add on to that?
No, I would say, you know, when you first think about doing this, it does seem a little overwhelming or onerous, if you will, but with the support we had available through the library, through a mentoring program, people sharing, and you never felt alone. And it just moves along fairly smoothly, putting in a little bit as you can each week. And before you know it, it's done. And so, you know, I would encourage people who are thinking about it to look into it a little further, because it can really be a rewarding experience. At least for me, it was.
There's a question, and I think Cindy, you're going to have to answer this one about
So
funding.
The question is there anything you can share about funding the Pressbooks subscription? We were able to fund because we have a fund for textbooks, a copy of each undergraduate textbook at the university. So we were able to fund this out of that money. And I believe, you know, over time, as the savings accrue, we'll probably look to getting more funding from other, you know, like the provost. We'd like to switch it that way, because as the books grow, the pricing does have the potential to grow up. Right now, we have the ability to have 40 books created. So.
And I guess,
I'm
sorry.
I was going to just tag on to what you all had been talking about earlier with kind of some lessons learned and things of that nature. And I totally agree with what you were saying, Andi, about how you and Catherine worked together on that. I was actually inspired and encouraged by hearing others who had gone before me. I thought, what do I know? I'm a nurse. I don't know how to write a textbook. And just that encouragement, that peer support was huge. And then as Karen outlined, like just the organization, and then, you know, we would have small group meetings and share tips about Jamboard and things of that nature. And we all work in different departments, but I felt like it just created a community of authors, if you will, here. And I just really have learned so much from my colleagues here. And I think for me, starting with the adapting has inspired me then to now I'm creating another book this year, just because I have the confidence to do so. But the student feedback has been amazing. Students love it, love it, love it. And I've had now over, let's see, this is the third time this has been offered. It's with the textbook, and that they are really enjoying the textbook and not having to pay for it, but also they see the relevance to the course.
I would say also too what Cindy mentioned at the end about the impact, and part of the reason we have it in our title is global. When I started this, I thought we were just helping our students here at UWF. And when Cindy started getting in a lot of the Google statistics, I was just floored by where my book had ended up. I don't think we're in Iceland and Antarctica yet, but there's certain books that there aren't a lot out there, and for us, the midterm wasn't one that had that we could find easily. But just knowing that what Katherine and I created has impacted so many students around the globe, also just makes my heart happy that those students are saving. And as a parent of a high schooler, I'm hoping that more and more people do this too, because when he gets to college, his textbook cost can go down by this. And also sort of what Kathy was saying with her presentation is, with courses that require access code or online content, those processes at the beginning of the semester, especially if you do teach short 8-week course like we do in our department and Kathy's department, if a student doesn't have the textbook for the first 2 weeks, that's a quarter of the semester gone. So by having it accessed first day, that eliminates a lot of those inequities that can occur due to financial issues. So. Any other questions, or our panel, any other comments? Katherine, I know you're our tech expert. Everybody should clone a Katherine, I've decided.
I'm going to drop a link in the chat, Lindsay. I saw that you're interested in H5P. This page shows all of the different activity types, and it's what I use a lot when I'm trying to brainstorm what's possible. It shows examples of each type, so that might be something you can take a look at.
I guess I'll say something else too. Another thing is when other campuses may want to use your work, it's been a great way for me to connect with faculty across the country and talk with them about, what we're doing. Like Cindy said, we don't have the integration right now with Canvas to have our activities go from the textbook into our grade book. What I've done is I've, told students to take a screenshot and then load that into the assignment folder. But just talking things over with other faculty, finding out how they've been using my textbook, or, me helping them, make this transition, just has been a great thing too. Just meeting people around the country and knowing that we're helping their students out also.
Such a great form of professional development, especially as many of us move towards non-traditional educational environments. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you. And this is also good too for your students that I know some of you teach during the summer. Students that may be traveling, they don't have to worry about having a book shipped to them, or we have a large military population in the Pensacola area. And so some of our students are on bases around the world, so they can access that book first day. And I see we have some more things in the chat. Let's see. Is hesitant because they will lose access to test bank and resources. Any recommendations for overcoming that? Some OER books do have online content for those type of things, test banks and assignments. You just have to look, usually they're in the acknowledgement page or just overall information page. Cindy, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
They'll let you know, and those are usually held under, sometimes you're having to give in a code to have access to that book, because of course we wouldn't want our students to have access to all that. You know, what I've done, we haven't done those ancillaries for the textbooks that I've done, you know, as a separate press book, but I usually wind up talking with faculty on how I develop assignments, like, you know, Katherine showed, you know, taking screenshots of the test yourself as a quiz. You know, we've had in medical terminology, there's a medical term in context assignment. They take a screenshot of that. So that's sort of how we've dealt with that. But usually the authors, I mean, all the authors that I've reached out to have been really easygoing and forthcoming with information on how to do that if there aren't ancillaries. Anybody else?
I was going to just add on that I've heard the hesitancy about losing access to test banks and things like that. But the reality is that students likely already have access to those test banks, publisher test banks when they come out. And so what I've done, and not everyone in my department does this, but have my own test bank repository that I'm not relying upon a textbook for that. But also, I wanted to mention, Andi, there was another question there about tenure that you might have overlooked.
I was going to mention in regards to ancillary, there are quite a few textbooks that are put out by OpenStax covering broad areas. I mean, everything from history to hard sciences. And they have a lot of ancillary built in. Also, through that site, you can find sites that have ancillary resources at a much reduced price. So I'm sorry, Kathy.
No, I actually would like to echo what Kathy said about, for those people using test banks, I would encourage them to go on to Chegg and some of these websites and see if the test bank is out there and available to students. So that's why I stopped using all of that, because it's out there. And did the same thing, created my own, or used a different format, like something that couldn't be answers couldn't be looked up on Chegg, like a short answer question or something like that. But I echo that.
Okay, I saw that, Kathy, thanks for pointing out the tenure question. So all of us on the line on the Zoom are not in a tenured position. I know for us, we're in, most of us are in clinical lines. And so with the clinical lines, I know for our departments, we redid our bylaws, and OERs are some of those exemplars that can be used. It just would have to be specific to your school. And since we don't have any tenures in our department, but I don't know if Cindy, if you've heard other tenure departments on campus using that.
Not yet. I think that's something that needs to be discussed more across campus, because as you know, with the growth of the increase of use of OER, and then the ability to create and adapt, I think this is a growing question. There are quite a few good resources, and Cheryl put one in the in the chat, Doer S3, and they have a chart actually that kind of maps out the work that you do with OERs and where that falls as where you would put that with tenure and promotion. A lot of it is service, would go under service, but nothing yet across campus.
Any other questions? We'd be happy to answer. Panel, do you have any other thoughts to share to this group? All right. Well, I guess we'll end it just a little bit early so y'all can have a little bit of a break before your next session. But please, once again, feel free to reach out to us at our emails here. Check out our books, and you know, we hope this inspired you to get on the OER bandwagon and join this movement to help our students cut costs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you to the audience for your participation in today's session. Please use the survey linked in the chat to nominate any TLC presentation for a conference award and share your feedback on your conference experience. Thank you so much for joining us. And feel free to reach out. We are definitely all inspired. Thank you, ladies.